Chapter 91. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 91. You don't have to use too much force. Author. Bitter days. Machine translation. Yin Qianchen did not move, did not refuse, and did not pander, but his eyes still maintained his usual coldness. Liang Yunsheng gently rubbed his lips, and her face could not help but turn red. She had never done such a bold thing, but this was a kiss that she was willing to try hard to offer. Such a pure kiss. It did not contain any lust, just a simple and reassuring touch. The faint sunset shone through the branches and leaves in the forest and into the window, forming mottled halos. The young girl's fair and tender face was flushed, as if she was offering up her purest and most beautiful self. Was this the first kiss in her heart? This can also be a way to kiss people. Liang Yunsheng let go of him and shyly looked up at him. A kiss is a way for people to express their feelings. It should be like this: you don't have to kiss so hard and painfully every time, as if your heart was torn apart. It should be gentle. The two of them maintained a moment of silence, and Liang Yunsheng did not say anything else. Let's go back. Finally, Yin Qianchen opened his mouth, and his voice was a little hoarse. Are you coming too? Liang Yunsheng asked in a low voice. Yin Qianchen pulled her arm away, took the lead to open the door, and walked out. So. Did she succeed? Liang Yunsheng was a little excited in her heart. It allowed him to return to the normal Yin Qianchen. Yes, she was sure that when he told her to go back, the hostility in his eyes had dissipated. Even though he was still indifferent and unfathomable in the past, that was enough. When they walked out of the house, Hao Cheng was indeed no longer there. He must have realized that he could not help Liang Yunsheng in any way, so he went back obediently. At this time, the sun was already setting. It was almost dark, so they had to hurry out of this gloomy place. Yin Qianchen's car was parked not far away. He motioned for Liang Yunsheng to stand here and wait for him. However, before he could drive over, another domineering off-road sports car drove over from the small road. The car stopped exactly 1 meter away from Yin Qianchen. Yin Qianchen did not step back, but Liang Yunsheng was so frightened by this dangerous scene that she broke out in a cold sweat. A man got out of the car. With just one glance, one could see that his lines were cold and hard. He was so imposing that no one dared to look at him again. The man was also handsome, but his face was rough and he looked more mature. Therefore, he could not be compared with Yin Qianchen's handsomeness. The reason why he was inexplicably compared with Yin Qianchen was because of the similarity between their brows. Hao Cheng hurriedly walked down from the passenger seat. His expression was much better than when he left earlier. He followed behind the man. When he saw that Liang Yunsheng and Yin Qianchen were already standing outside the house, he quickly came forward and asked, Miss Yunsheng, are you all right? Who is it? Liang Yunsheng frowned slightly and asked Hao Cheng in a low voice. O.org. The strange man did not give Liang Yunsheng a good feeling. His name is Yin Juanze, he is the young master of the Yin family. I. Sigh. Hao Cheng answered Liang Yunsheng's question with a regretful look on his face. He was also a member of the Yin family. Liang Yunsheng was shocked and didn't have time to think. Yin Juanze had already reached out his hand and threw a punch at Yin Qianchen. Chapter 92. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 92. There were even bloody hickeys. Author. Bitter days. Machine translation. What was going on? Brothers meeting. It was rare to see such a big fight all of a sudden. Liang Yunsheng stood aside and was even swept away by Yin Juanze's punch. She was naturally not worried that Yin Qianchen could dodge this punch. However, he had not eaten or drank for a day and his mental state was on the verge of collapse. Was he really not going to be hurt? Fortunately, Yin Qianchen was still agile and not only was he not hurt, he even raised his hand and grabbed his wrist. Seeing the veins on the back of his hand bulging, it was obvious that he had used all his strength. Therefore, even Yin Juanze could not move an inch. "Is this how you greet your brother, when you see him?" Yin Junzi said coldly. Yin Qianchen let go of his hand as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "Brother. What is it? How long has it been since you've been home?" Yin Juanze curled the corners of his lips and sneered. He looked up at the gloomy and cold house. "You still remember this place?" "Shut up." Liang Yunqing had never seen Yin Qianchen being so emotional and scolding others. Presumably, his brother also knew about his past. "Since you have no problem, I'll go back first. Don't forget what I said, go home when you have time." Yin Juanze turned around and opened the door of the SUV without turning his head. He sat in the driver's seat and sped away. Yin Qianchen slowly walked to Hao Cheng, looked at him, and nodded gently. Hao Cheng has really improved. Now he not only knows how to interfere in my affairs, but also knows how to find people to deal with me. Yin Qianchen got closer, and Liang Yunqing quickly stepped in, opening her arms to block Hao Cheng. "Don't hit him." Hao Cheng had already been slapped twice by him before, and Yin Juanze was most likely the one he found to help her. Although she also hated that person, she had to admit that Yin Juanze was probably the only person she had ever seen who could compete with Yin Qianchen in terms of imposing manner. Hao Cheng was so loyal to her, so she naturally could not watch him be punished by Yin Qianchen again. However, Yin Qianchen glanced at her indifferently and did not say anything else. He got into the car and drove away. "Hey!" He left without waiting for them. Liang Yunqing could not help but feel depressed. Yin Qianchen left first. Hao Cheng then turned around and looked at Liang Yunqing carefully. Liang Yunqing's cherry lips were red and swollen, and there were bite marks on them. Her clothes were messy, and the buttons on her collar were missing. The most important thing was Dioviko on Liang Yunqing's fair and clean neck, there was a scab. Forming hickey. He really couldn't bear to look at it. Hao Cheng held his forehead. Liang Yunqing saw his action and immediately asked with concern, "Hao Cheng, are you okay? Are you dizzy? Yin Qianchen really is too much. Anyway, we're going to drive away, so why don't you drive us away together?" Hao Cheng felt that after hearing Liang Yunqing's words, he really felt a headache. "Miss Yunqing, it's understandable for Sir to act like this. No one would be happy if you protected another man like this in front of him, however. It's a miracle that the two of us didn't die here today." "Ha!" Liang Yunqing didn't pay much attention to Hao Cheng's words because her mind was full of questions about Yin Qianchen. Yes. This was a miracle, Hao Cheng thought. To be able to calm down Yin Qianchen, who had fallen into a inhuman state and returned to normal. Liang Yunqing was probably the first person so far. "I really want to know more about Yin Qianchen." Yes, Liang Yunqing wasn't scared. Instead, she wanted to know more about what had happened to make him like this. She did not know anything about him, so she was not qualified yet. However, she could wait until that day came. Chapter 93. Those Things About Adulthood. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 93. Chapter 93. Those Things About Adulthood. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Liang Yunqing thought that her relationship with Yin Qianchen would change because of the incident that day, whether it was good or bad, but in fact, nothing had changed. Hao Cheng, on the other hand, always teased her, saying that he was grateful to God for giving them Miss Yunqing, which was why he was able to control Mr. Yin without looking at his terrifying appearance. In fact, the fact that Yin Qianchen did not have any reaction to this incident was the biggest change in him. Until 1 month after Yin Qianchen's birthday, on a sunny afternoon, Liang Yunqing was bored after playing frisbee with her for the whole morning. She gasped for breath and felt that she could finally rest. Hao Cheng respectfully took the boring leash and said with a smile, "Sir has gone to South Africa." Perhaps. He won't come back for nearly half a year. Liang Yunqing was stunned for a moment, trying hard not to reveal the emotions in her heart. After calming down from the news, she put on a stiff smile and said, "Will he be gone for so long? Could it be that he did not want to see her again, or what happened that he needed to be gone for so long?" However, it seemed that he was overestimating himself. How could Hao Qing know what Yin Qianqian was thinking? 6 months. Another separation. And after all the bad memories. Liang Yunqing's fingertip had painted a framed oil painting of the blue sky and white clouds in her room. This was supposed to be a part of her birthday present to him. It was very similar to the painting she had seen before, but it was not quite the same. Right. Hao Qing. Liang Yunqing suddenly remembered something and hurriedly ran downstairs to find Hao Qing. "Do you still remember my small pottery figurines? Where did they go?" Hao Qing was stunned for a moment and shook his head in confusion. "I'm sorry, Miss Yunqing. I didn't notice them after that." Hao Qing looked very apologetic because as a butler, he should be in charge of every detail. Liang Yunqing was a little disappointed. Even if Yin Qianqian didn't like them, they were a gift that she made herself. On the private plane, an expressionless man was playing with a little girl's clay doll in his hand. His fingertips gently tapped on her round little face. His pale lips opened slightly and uttered a word that couldn't be heard. "Stay." Yin Qianqian left, but Liang Yunqing knew that she could not lose her goal because of this. Even Yu Siyue had his own career and goal to strive for, and she naturally could not fall behind. After Yu Siyue found out that Liang Yunqing had oil painting skills, he volunteered to help her contact the seller. After a while, he really found a few people who liked Liang Yunqing's paintings, but their paintings had to be customized. Liang Yunqing was also subject to a lot of restrictions. After accumulating some funds, Liang Yunqing began to follow Yu Siyue and began to learn how to invest in this project in a daze. They made a few small moves first. It was more appropriate to call it an investment than a speculation. After paying the price for being young and losing everything for a few months, Liang Yunqing began to wonder if it was not suitable for her to survive in this treacherous shopping mall until one day. When she heard Yu Siyue unintentionally say something like, "The big fish eats the small fish eat the shrimps," she suddenly understood why Yin Qianqian wanted her to learn biology. On this earth, there was always a mutually beneficial relationship, and that was the food chain. Recently, their income had increased, and they were gradually prepared to take the money. They changed from an unstable speculation to a stable business model. The two of them were also very enthusiastic about their small business. "The profits will double next month, and you will be a millionaire." As long as Yu Siyue was with Liang Yunqing, he would always smile like this. "Have you ever thought about how to spend your coming-of-age ceremony?" Liang Yunqing was stunned by Yu Siyue's sudden words. Coming-of-age ceremony. Chapter 94. I can get engaged soon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 94. Chapter 94. I can get engaged soon. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation and 18-year-old coming-of-age ceremony. If Yu Siyue hadn't suddenly mentioned it, Liang Yunqing would have long forgotten about it. Only after Yu Siyue's reminder did Liang Yunqing realize that it had been 8 months since she had celebrated her 17th birthday in Germany. Yu Siyue actually knew the date of her birthday. Fortunately, Yu Siyue was by her side when she was lonely. Lonely. Why did she suddenly feel this way? Everything was actually the same, it was just the absence of one person. Just because of one person, would the whole world feel different? Of course, in everyone's life, there would always be one person. Yu Siyue reached out and held Liang Yunqing's neck. "When the time comes, I'll accompany you, okay?" Liang Yunqing blinked, held his hand and threw it down. "We'll discuss it again." We'll discuss it again. USYUE's pretty good face immediately darkened. Then, a few days ago, Mr. Wu asked if you were free to help him paint a few more oil paintings of the previous styles. No, Liang Yunqing refused decisively. At first, there was no quick way to make money by painting. She wanted a challenge from zero. The requirements were not high. At the very least, she would no longer be cared for by Yin Qianqian. The starting capital could only be earned by herself. That was why she had no choice. Now that their small business was on the right track, Liang Yunqing naturally only wanted to treat painting as her personal hobby. If this went on, the stench of money would rub off her love. Yu Xiyue naturally focused on Liang Yunqing's decision. Moreover, they did not lack money now. Then, do you want to go on a date with me in 2 days? Yu Xiyue smiled mischievously. One could not tell if he was sincere or joking. I'm not free. I want to go home to accompany boredom. Although Liang Yunqing said this, she knew in her heart that she would go home on time every day and almost never stay out. Other than the fact that she did not have this habit, she was afraid that she would not go home. She missed the time when some people went home. Is that your home? Yu Xiyue rarely said harsh words. This sentence did not sound like much, but it pierced the point in Liang Yunqing's heart that she minded. Liang Yunqing glanced at him and did not say anything more. She just stood up and left the place where the two of them were talking. After returning home, boredom continued as usual, giving her a surprise that was not a surprise. It pounced on her face and asked for a hug from love. It was another year, and boredom was much taller than before. This damn large dog. Liang Yunqing comforted it for a while, but it finally stopped shaking its head and tail out of boredom. It was inexplicably excited. Speaking of which, Miss Yunqing, it's almost your 18th birthday. Is there anything you want in particular? Hao Qing asked with a smile. It was another person who mentioned this to her. In fact, there were still more than 3 months before her birthday. It was only 18 years old, which was always a very special age. Liang Yunqing shook her head gently. Since she came to the Yin family, she had no special concept of material things. As for other things, she really wanted them, but she could not get them just because she wanted them. Logically speaking, when Miss Yunqing turns 18, she can wait for Mr. to come back and get engaged. Engaged? Liang Yunqing's heart stirred slightly. She looked up and saw Hao Cheng's teasing expression. She could not help but blush and ran back to her room. At night, the shortest needle on the clock had already pointed to 2 o'clock sharp. However, she was not sleepy at all because of what she had heard today. The day Yin Qianqian left for South Africa, Hao Cheng had already told her the phone number he used there. Liang Yunqing's fingertip gently swiped the name in the contact list on her phone, but she accidentally touched it. Oh no! Just as Liang Yunqing was flustered and did not know whether she should hang up or not, the call went through. Chapter 95. Are you still afraid that I'll eat you? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 95. Chapter 95. Are you still afraid that I'll eat you? Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. What time should it be in South Africa now? At the place 6 hours later than us, he accurately received her call. Hello. Hello, Liang Yunqing said in a low voice, looking a little flustered. Ever since what happened between the two of them in the old villa, they had never calmed down and had a proper conversation. Alright, even though the man who always had a cold face had never had a proper conversation with her. Liang Yunqing subconsciously touched the side of her neck. There was still a scar there, and she inexplicably felt that it was slightly hot. It was the mark that he had left on her body. What happened? Yin Qianqian asked in a very formulaic tone. Liang Yunqing naturally did not dare to say that she had accidentally touched the phone screen, so she dialed the number, stammering. She finally said, in 3 months, I will be 18 years old. Yin Qianchen did not say anything on the other end of the phone. Liang Yunqing continued, will you come back? It won't take too long. It's just that, this is my coming-of-age ceremony. Probably not. Yin Qianchen's voice sounded really distant, just like the distance between the two of them at this moment. It suddenly occurred to her that she seemed to have acted coquettishly to Yin Qianchen before. At that time, the two of them had just met, so the phone call was still unfamiliar to them. Mr. Yin, please. Liang Yunqing mumbled and softened her voice, repeating the same trick. This is a willful request, Yin Qianchen said decisively. Liang Yunqing's eyes were hot, as if she had just woken up from a dream. I'm sorry. She hurriedly hung up the phone, and that hateful shame rushed to her heart. Liang Yunqing quickly turned off the phone, threw it to her feet, and ignored it. What was wrong with her brain to think that she would inexplicably miss a person on such a night, a person who didn't care about her at all? Human feelings were so complicated. One day, you treated a person as the whole of your life, but in fact, you were just a small speck of dust on his path. Liang Yunqing felt depressed. She buried her head in the quilt. Who would be willing to treat the person she valued the most as a speck of dust under her feet? The next day, Liang Yunqing turned on her phone, and a series of missed calls from her communication assistant were received. Before she could take a closer look, she was interrupted by another call. I was wrong. I apologize. I will never say such things again, okay? Just as she pressed the answer button, Yu's barrage of words came from the other side. Why aren't you talking? Yue asked carefully when he didn't hear Liang Yunqing's voice. He didn't think of anything else, but he thought that Liang Yunqing was still angry because of his careless words. Nothing. Liang Yunqing was still angry when she got out of bed. As an apology, Yue said mysteriously, I will take you to a special place to celebrate your birthday, how about it? Where to? Liang Yunqing asked subconsciously. Yue smiled evilly, where to, you will know when the time comes. What? Are you afraid that I will eat you up? Liang Yunqing could not help but laugh. She did not expect Yue to say something like this. If you want to come, then come. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. At that time, Yue did not know that the little mischievous decision he made would turn the fate of the three of them upside down. Chapter 96. The Kiss of the Lost Night. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 96. Chapter 96. The Kiss of the Lost Night. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Location. Intoxication. 11 o'clock at night. In the noisy bar, there were lively voices of people, the lost decadence and clamor. Those who had company were partying, while those who didn't were enjoying the loneliness of being alone. The girl was wearing fiery red high heels, her long black hair cascading down her shoulders. She was also wearing a fiery red dress. The makeup on her face wasn't thick, but she had a rose-colored lip gloss, which made her appear pure and innocent. There was a hint of sexiness. L.rg. It was so tempting that one could not stop and wanted to approach her. However, she already had a flower protector by her side, which made those who tried to approach her a little timid. Please, I'm 18 today. It's not a problem for me to enter. What about Yue? Liang Yunqing curled the corners of her lips and looked at Yue, who was pretending to be mature beside her. She chuckled and said, 16 years old, barely. I just got my identity card. So this was the special 18-year-old adult gift that Yue mentioned. That really disappointed her. Did she think that bringing her to this place would scare her? If it was 2 years ago, the confused and uneasy Liang Yunqing might have really been embarrassed, or even made no mistake. However, after almost a year in Germany, Liang Yunqing had already been to such a place, but she had always disliked such occasions. It was not that she was afraid, but it was too easy to lose herself in such a place. Even though she knew that Yusue wanted to play tricks, she still chose to indulge herself today. Tisk tisk, if you think it's that simple. Today is Anoitada Desajo's night of terror. As an adult, don't you want to play, exciting once? Anoitada Desajo. In Spanish, the meaning of the night of desire. This was not a good word. Before Liang Yunqing finished her sentence, all the lights in the room were suddenly extinguished. Everyone was shocked. Anoitada Desajo's night of terror, the rules were naturally different from the rest. In an unexpected time, all the lights in the room were extinguished and turned on 5 minutes later. Other than burning, killing, robbing, and other illegal things, one could do anything. Hugging, kissing, or touching. Anything related to desire was allowed to exist, and one could not resist. As long as one walked into the intoxicated person, they would obey this rule. Liang Yunqing was stunned. An ice-cold lips touched her lips. This kiss. It was not deep, but it was a malicious sip of hot wine into her mouth. Liang Yunqing was so hot that tears were about to come out. Her eyes were watery. However, in such a chaotic situation, no one could see such a beautiful scene. She was kissed. Yusue, whom she did not hate, but at this moment, she felt extremely disgusted. She was touched on the lips and disgusted. Why was it like this? Not only did she hate this kiss, but she also hated herself at this moment, because she thought of that person. Why couldn't it be him? She suddenly became disgusted with herself. She even subconsciously reached out and slapped Yue's face. I'm sorry, I can't afford it. Liang Yunqing lowered her eyes and quickly turned around to leave the bar. Yusue felt the pain and touched the corner of his broken lips, revealing a desolate smile. You want to find your little girlfriend? Suddenly, a voice appeared beside Yusue. He turned around and found that it was Ling Mo's annoying face. You probably don't know what kind of good stuff you just drank, right? Ling Mo picked up Yusue's cup and shook it in his hand, smiling evilly. Yusue held the chair with one hand. Sure enough, a strange heat rushed from his lower abdomen to his body. At this moment, he was thinking of something more important. Oh no! Just now. Liang Yunqing also drank a mouthful of the wine that he had fed her. Chapter 97. Don't touch me. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 97. Chapter 97. Don't touch me. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. After walking for a long distance, Liang Yunqing suddenly felt a stuffy and hot feeling in her chest. How did she get drunk after just one mouthful of wine? However, the wine just now was very strong. She usually did not touch such things. It was because Germany was a big beer country. Therefore, when she occasionally drank a cup, other than turning into Guangong's face, it was nothing. However, it could not be compared to such a high degree of wine. There was a feeling of discomfort in her stomach. Liang Yunqing could not help but feel like vomiting. She squatted on the ground and retched twice, but she could not vomit no matter how hard she tried. This wine really made her drunk a little too quickly. She probably would not be able to last until she took a taxi home. Because she thought that if Hao Cheng knew where she wanted to go today, he would definitely think of a way to stop her, so she secretly ran out of the house. Liang Yunqing's mind flashed back to Hao Cheng's disappointed expression when he proposed to celebrate her birthday, but she rejected him politely. Her head began to feel dizzy. She tried her best to pull herself together and took out her cell phone. She wanted to call Hao Cheng and ask him to send a car to pick her up. It was not even 12 o'clock yet, should be. She still had time to eat the cake that they had prepared for her. Liang Yunqing could not control herself. Her hands started to tremble for no reason. Her phone fell to the ground unsteadily. Her feet were light as if she had stepped on cotton. She reached out to pick up the phone on the ground, but there was an inexplicable double image in front of her. It made her look down on the situation in front of her. What was going on? The current situation was too abnormal. A man's long hand picked up the phone on the ground and handed it to her. "Thank you," Liang Yunqing said in a low voice and reached out to take it. Unexpectedly, the man seemed to be deliberately teasing her and suddenly withdrew his hand. She staggered and fell into the man's arms. He caught her with one hand. Liang Yunqing suddenly felt goosebumps and had a terrible thought in her mind. Late at night, in the chaotic bar street, a drunk girl and a strange man. "Don't touch me." She pushed the man away. The man did not forcefully hold her back and released her with force. Her gaze fell on the man's face, but she could not focus it. Her vision was blurry, but she could not see the man's face clearly. She could only feel that the man was about the same height as Yin Qianqian, and he seemed to be a little stronger than him. No. She probably did not know what Yin Qianqian looked like now. He had abandoned her and left for so long. Why was he thinking of that person again? No, narcissism. From the beginning, didn't she know? Yin Qianqian was just treating her as a joke and a pet. Why? Why was she still? Probably because of the effects of the alcohol, she became more and more unstable. Liang Yunqing suddenly started to cry, and pearl-like tears fell down her smooth face. Perhaps it was the tender tears that touched the man's heart, but he suddenly walked over and reached out to hug Liang Yunqing's body. She felt a warm and soft object gently brush past her face. It was her lips. That man was lowering his head and kissing her falling tears. No. Liang Yunqing's body trembled and she resisted with a sobbing tone. The alcohol and drug effects had reached their peak and she did not have the strength to move anymore. She reached out to grab the man's lapel and suddenly asked, "Yin. Is that you? Yin Qianqian." Chapter 98. He would never be so gentle. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 98. Chapter 98. He would never be so gentle. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. The man did not answer her question, nor did he let go of her hand. "Let go. Let go. Let go. Who are you?" Liang Yunqing felt dizzy, and her legs were weak. Even though she tried hard to pretend to struggle, in fact, it was just like playing with tickles, not to mention this man in front of her. The man grabbed her wrist to stop her from talking nonsense and moving around uncontrollably. The feeling of her wrist being grabbed was a little familiar. Yin Qianqian. In a trance, she vaguely felt that she had seen the man's face clearly. Why? She felt like she had really seen him. The man responded softly, almost inaudible. "It's really you." Liang Yunqing suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck and rubbed her head against his shoulder. She was acting coquettishly. "Why did you suddenly abandon me?" Liang Yunqing's voice sounded a little aggrieved and a little miserable. "Are you angry at me for doing something wrong? If I had known earlier. If I had known earlier. I wouldn't have meddled in other people's business. Why did you abandon me?" Liang Yunqing kept talking, but if the person standing in front of her was the real Yin Qianqian, then he would be able to understand what she meant. The man paused for a moment and didn't move again. He just reached out his hand and gently touched the fluffy hair on her head. "No. You're not him." Liang Yunqing's nerves were triggered somewhere and she suddenly became excited. She let go of the man in front of her. He won't be so gentle. Perhaps he was not in the mood to continue pestering the crazy girl in front of him. He walked forward and directly carried her away from the ground with a princess hug. "Ah! Let go of me. Let go of me quickly. Don't touch me, disgusting." Liang Yunqing struggled. She did not want to be touched by anyone. "Don't touch." No one can touch her." At first, she could still shout, but her body was getting hotter and hotter. After the entanglement with the man in front of her, she almost lost all her strength. "Shut up." The man's voice was steady and magnetic. Liang Yunqing really stopped moving and did not speak. Her whole body was soft, and she could only lie in that man's arms. Lowering her head, Liang Yunqing moved her entire face closer and hid in his arms. She started to sob softly, and her emotions were very unstable. When the alcohol and the drug were mixed together, Liang Yunqing's excitement had passed. Now, her entire body was soft and her breathing was a little rapid. She felt like she could not breathe. "She's really dumb." The man sighed helplessly. He hugged her body tightly and did not let her move anymore. The man walked straight to his car. He did not show any mercy at all. He threw her in the back seat and walked to the driver's seat with his long legs. Then, he parked the car in front of a star-rated hotel. Without any hesitation, he went to the back seat of the car, picked up Liang Yunqing, whose mind was completely controlled by the drug, and strode to the hotel. Fortunately, he took the VIP channel in the hotel. It was late at night and there was no one else. He lowered his head to look at the person in his arms. His usually cold face showed a moment of helplessness. Go where?" Squinting her eyes, Liang Yunqing opened her mouth and said softly but pleasantly. Chapter 99. Just to get this kind of touch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 99. Chapter 99. Just to get this kind of touch. Author. Bitter days. Machine translation. Liang Yunqing mumbled to herself, but of course, she could not get any answer. At this moment, Liang Yunqing's face was already flushed red. Other than the heat all over her body, there were only waves of itchy throbbing. She really wanted. But what did she want? She did not know that her mind was in a mess, and her body was extremely uncomfortable. Liang Yunqing swallowed her saliva. Her limbs and bones felt like they were being gnawed on by tiny ants. It was uncomfortable, it was truly unbearable. What should she do? That damned Yue. Exactly. Exactly what did he drink? Suddenly, an ice-cold and soft object touched her lips, making her feel very comfortable. She could not help but go forward and chase after the feeling that made her feel cool. She was kissed. But it seemed like it was not as annoying as the previous time. In front of her small nose, she smelled a familiar scent, making her feel at ease. It was not intense, but it was a very possessive kiss, which seemed to tell her who she belonged to at the moment. After the kiss was over, a cool mineral water slowly entered her mouth. Liang Yunqing felt the cold liquid slowly slide from her mouth into her scalding body. But this little bit of coolness could not be her final salvation. It was not enough, it was not enough, she wanted more. She opened her eyes in a daze and saw Yin Qianqian sitting on a mahogany leather chair beside her. His deep and slightly sunken brows had formed a natural gully when he saw Liang Yunqing waking up. He was stern and stern. Under his sharp nose bridge, his thin, pale lips were tightly pursed into a straight line. It's really you, also. Fortunately, it's you. Liang Yunqing seemed to be relieved. In fact, her mind was still abnormally blurry at the moment, but that was how she was. She could feel that aura. At this moment, Liang Yunqing was lying on the soft bed in the hotel. Her body was gasping weakly. The only thing she had was to lift her eyelids slightly to see the strength of the person in front of her. Her mental strength seemed to be fighting with the most primitive desire in her body. Yin Qianqian did not speak. He stood up and placed a hand beside her ear. He leaned over her and looked at his face expressionlessly. His entire body was filled with a murderous aura. It was obvious that he was very unhappy. Liang Yunqing could no longer struggle. She could only move her head slightly. It would take a lot of her strength to move her body slightly. The heat flow in her body seemed to become more and more intense as she woke up. Don't. It was so embarrassing, it was better not to see him again in such a situation. Liang Yunqing bit her lower lip and grabbed the cloth under her body with her white fingertips. She turned her face away, not wanting to look at Yin Qianqian. However, the more unwilling she was to face Yin Qianqian, the more he reached out his hand to hold her delicate chin and turned her head forcefully. You went to the bar dressed like this. You must have done this to get this touch, right? Yin Qianqian snorted and his strong palm slowly touched her slim waist. Liang Yunqing's waist immediately softened after being touched. She finally let go of one of her clenched teeth and let out a soft sound, which was mixed with a sob that made one's heart itch. No. Chapter 100. A special coming-of-age ceremony. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 100. Chapter 100. A special coming-of-age ceremony. Author. Bitter Days. Machine translation. Don't do this. It was a simple sentence, but Liang Yunqing said it as if it was as difficult as lifting a heavy stone. She did not know whether she wanted to escape or whether she was willing to indulge in this mysterious perception that should not appear in her body. On the snow-white bed, her fiery red clothes and crimson face were even more alluring. The heat kept rising, and the surrounding air seemed to be filled with heat. That willful hand started a fire all over her body. It was as if she was being burned by fire. She was in extreme pain, but not only was she being burned by fire, because deep in the bones and blood of her body, there was also an unusual, sour expectation. Do you really want to be treated like this? Yin Qianqian's voice was playful, completely devoid of the usual coldness. I didn't. After saying only 3 words, Liang Yunqing could not help but let out a soft moan and heavy breathing along with her loosened lips. She could no longer control her voice and actions. One of her hands tightly gripped the quilt under her body, and her body twisted in discomfort and dissatisfaction. Don't move unless I tell you to. Yin Qianqian followed where he had just touched and gently massaged her waist. Ah! Liang Yunqing sniffled and complained in a nasal voice, bad person. Bad person, from the beginning, didn't you know that I'm a bad person? Yin Qianqian's breathing became heavier. He lowered his head and kissed her ear. Liang Yunqing trembled sensitively, but he did not let her go. He opened his mouth and gently bit her ear, then kissed the neck that still had a small scar. The wound was very shallow, but it seemed to be deep. It was a deep and insurmountable gap between the two of them. After rubbing their ears together, the heat between the two did not decrease, but instead increased. The air that they inhaled seemed to have a strong scent of desire. Liang Yunqing's rose-red dress was pulled off her body at some point. Yin Qianqian picked her up, so the weak Liang Yunqing could only lean on him. Her delicate and soft body was in his arms, as white and cute as a newborn baby. However, she was not as honest as a baby. She hummed twice, either rubbing her body or touching it subconsciously. Really? Asking for it. This is the thing you should remember the most about tonight. Yin Qianqian's voice was a little distant, but Liang Yunqing could still hear it clearly. He said, don't be so stupid and fall for someone else's trick. Let's see if you will follow someone else so naturally in the future. She really wanted to ask, since you knew I would fall for it, why didn't you save me during that time? However, she was so powerless, and she was somewhat intoxicated by this passionate entanglement. Today is the day you come of age. Yin Qianqian's voice sounded a little hoarse. He lowered his head and kissed her from between her eyebrows, the tip of her nose, her lips, and her chin bit by bit. It was like a dragonfly skimming the water, and there was some special love. Liang Yunqing moaned in a daze, but she was still somewhat conscious. When she heard Yin Qianqian's words, her heart trembled slightly. He still remembered the important day that he had for her today. She did not know if it was because she was touched or because she was surprised, but she thought that she was not worth mentioning in his heart. No, it was because she would not live in any small corner of his heart. I want to give you a special adult gift. After Yin Qianqian said that, his actions were no longer as gentle as before. He was overbearing and ruthless, but there was a trace of impatience that could not be controlled.